Our last speaker is Kathy Ryan. Dr. Ryan is the Chief of the Research Regulatory Compliance at the U.S. Army Institute of Surgical Research in, is it San Antonio or Houston, or are they the same place? Okay, San Antonio, Texas, and she's going to talk to us about working with the military. Thank you, Dr.
Wow,
Ryan.
that's going to be hard to, I'm not going to go as fast. And I'm not nearly as caffeinated, obviously. Okay, so yeah, I've worked for the military for my entire career after postdoc, and so I want to tell you a little bit about that. First, I have to tell you these are my own opinions and not those of the U.S. government. Yes, it's obligatory. Okay, the first thing I was thinking about in starting this, I was starting my negotiation slides, and then I realized we're this huge monolithic black box and nobody understands what kind of people we have in that black box. So I need to tell you a little bit about the types of employees and workers. Obviously, we have active duty military. We have, like me, I'm a Department of Defense civilian. Uncle Sam does write me a check every 2 weeks. It's wonderful. For those two jobs, you do need to be U.S. citizens, okay? We also hire folks that are contractors. And I was a contractor for 7.5 years after my postdoc, actually. Worked for a small liberal arts university, Trinity University in San Antonio, for Brooks Air Force Base. So you can contract with the university, you can contract with a private company, and we also, of course, we have a lot of postdocs now, and we typically will go through ORISE, Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education, or a university or National Research Council. To be a contractor or postdoc, we will hire foreign nationals for those jobs. Now, I'm only going to talk about, if you're in the military, you're not going to negotiate. No, you're not negotiating. You know, if you sign and put the uniform, that's, you know, you're done for. And the contractors, you're going to talk with your company, and so a lot of what others have said will probably apply to that. What I'm going to talk about is being a DoD civilian. And when I say DoD civilian, some of the stuff I'm going to give you, like where to find jobs, there's one website for, if you want to be a research physiologist at a government lab, you go to usajobs.gov. If you want to be a park ranger, you go to usajobs.gov. There are so yeah, you can look for anything there. Any government job, it's there. FBI, CIA, whatever. There are search capabilities, and you kind of need to be careful a little bit. For example, you could put in physiologist. You could put in a location. If you want to stay in San Antonio or you want to go someplace else, you can do that, and you can set up search results alerts. It's actually a very oddly enough, for a government system, it's actually pretty user-friendly and works pretty well. I'm going to talk about most of our biomedical jobs for the military are going to be in the Army Medical Research and Materiel Command, and it's MRMC. We are not under a traditional civil service plan, so we're not really in a GS kind of system. We're in what's called lab demo plan, and so I'll talk a little bit about that. And to decipher a job listing on USA Jobs for a lab demo, let's say you put in physiologist. I want to be a physiologist. You're going to come up with something that says DB, which is Scientists and Engineers, Occupational Series, a pay band, so DB3 encompasses GS 13 to 14, and a research physiologist is an 0413. So I was an 04103, DB 04133 for a long time. Now I'm a DB 060103. So you do have to look at those things and kind of understand that. Okay, so let's say you are selected. And the other thing, let me just throw this out. If there's a description, a position description that says, we want somebody that studies blood pressure regulation, autonomic function, et cetera, you better make sure in your CV it says blood pressure regulation, autonomic function, et cetera, because the first thing that happens is a computer matches it. And you may have that experience, but if you don't have those keywords, you're not going to get past the computer to somebody that actually reads anything. So just be aware of that. So if you are selected, now is the time to negotiate. Even if you can negotiate relocation costs, and sometimes the posting will say, we're not going to pay for you to move someplace. Sometimes you can even negotiate that. It kind of depends on the institute. But it's really important that you negotiate at this point for your base pay, because it's just like Catherine said, this is going to follow you for the rest of your career. Our salaries are base pay plus a location adjustment. So let's say I'm working in the DC area, I'm going to get more in my location adjustment because the cost of living is more than San Antonio, where the cost of living is very cheap and we fall into rest of US. So they're going to know, they're going to ask you for your current salary. So they're going to know that. And so when I would suggest absolutely doing a counter offer, but, you know, don't ask for the moon. And I did make a lot of the mistakes that Catherine was talking about when I was younger. You know, yeah, it comes from experience, right? But they are going to know that. Know what the minimum is for that pay band. You know, don't ask for $25,000 more than you made from your postdoc. They will know those things, but ask for something reasonable. The other thing to know is that this lab demo plan is not like the old GS system where if you stay, you know, step 1 for a year, you get promoted to step 2 for a year, you get promoted on. This is pay for performance. And so we actually, Trevor was talking about a list of accomplishments. Every year I have to do a list of accomplishments and present them to my supervisor. And based on that, I get a grade, A, B, C, or F, actually. And so, haven't gotten one of those. So really, you know, that current salary it's a formula, and it's what determines your merit race. And once you are in the system, you don't get to negotiate. So that's why the base salary is so dang important for us, because it will follow you for a long, long time, because there is no ability to negotiate, with one exception I'll show you in a minute. The other thing to know is you get a merit raise in September and then cost of living at the first of the year, and that's totally dependent on the president. This past year it was 1.3%. When the economy was so bad, we got 0. So when I first came in, it was a catch-up year. I started December 5th at the bottom of the pay band. It was a catch-up year. Congress gave us 10%, and I thought, wow, I've only worked for three weeks, and does this happen every year? What you won't have to negotiate, and this is very different from academia, at startup, there is no startup package. We work in teams, we work in areas, and the initial funding for your research is going to come from that research team. But you don't worry about that at all, it's fine. Now, if you've been there for a long time and you do want to move into apply for a DB4 position and move pay bands, that's when you can negotiate. Typically, those are going to be management positions, and we're limited in our negotiation. It's got to be a minimum of 6% of the base pay up to $10,000 of a maximum. So we're very limited in how we can negotiate. Now, what I did want to talk a little bit about is daily negotiation skills. We really are the definition of a hierarchy. People literally wear their rank right here on their uniform, okay? And so you absolutely must respect rank, both military and civilian. There is such a thing as military etiquette. If you were to join the Army, you would learn about that in courses for that. And so for me, how I've been kind of successful, when I have been successful, is to pick my battles. What's important? You know, like Mick Jagger says, you don't always get what you want, but you usually get what you need. And so think about that. Think about what can you control, but what's out of your control. And the scientists that succeed with us really are team players. They're focused on getting the job done. And when you're productive, that builds political capital. And you can use that later on, you know. And what's best for you is often what's best for the team and for the institute. When you approach big decisions, first thing, who's the decision maker? A lot of times, I'm to the point where I'm older than the commanders, the colonels that command, actually, and I may have more experience, but I don't have the final say. But our senior leaders really do want to hear opinions and concerns during the decision-making process. The smart ones do. And be thoughtful, understand other people's perspectives, and organize your arguments. You know, don't ever go into the commander and say, sir, this is a problem, and not give a course of action to solve it. It's really important. Finally, if you don't agree with the decision, let's say, Colonel makes a decision and you don't agree with it, there's two questions to ask. One, is it legal? Two, does he or she have the authority to make that decision? And if the answer to both of those is yes, you salute and you move on. Because if you don't, you lose credibility and you lose political capital. And remember, our mission is paramount. That's what we're there for. My mission at Institute of Surgical Research is to, we do combat casualty care research to take better care of wounded soldiers on the battlefield, which quite frankly, there's no mission that's better for a physiologist than that. So I've been very blessed being there. And with that, that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Ryan. That was wonderful as well. So we have time now to have a question and answer session. And I think I mentioned before, this is being recorded, so if you have a question for our panel, step up to the microphone that's right over here and ask your question. And so I'm going to ask the panel to come back up here so that they can answer questions, and I'll scooch out of the way.
We heard throughout know your worth, so can somebody maybe expand a little bit on that to our trainees that either are transitioning from being graduate students and, making a stipend, so to say, to a biotech job, or transitioning from a postdoc where also salaries are aligned by NIH to faculty. So how do you know what your worth is and what you have to be asking for or you need to be asking for?
Well, I can speak from the faculty perspective. I think I'm going to sit down because this doesn't come out. It is quite easy to get comparative salary information. If you're in a medical school environment, the AAMC does a survey every year, and it's broken down by area of the country, different disciplines, basic science versus clinical, different types of institutions, and there are similar salary surveys for other non-medical school institutions as well. So that's, and if you're in a public institution like mine, the salary scales are also published, although you always need to be aware that most faculty are not paid on that scale. They get more than the scale.
I would say for small liberal arts schools, the common place to look for any information is Chronicle of Higher Ed, and all of the schools are listed. I actually think our medical schools and stuff are listed as well, but that's a good place to start, and then talking to people. I mean, most people at this point in time are willing to be honest about what they get paid and where they started.
I think your question to me is actually twofold, right? So not just your salary, but know what you're worth, the value that you're bringing to that job. Is that what you're asking? So when you take a look at a job description and you see sometimes the minimum requirements, maybe you hit some of them, but not all of them. But you might have some skills that are transferable, right, from what you've been doing, and really how that can help that particular employer. You really have to do that self-assessment and how you stack up. And then to everybody else's point, for jobs such as in sales in the biotech industry like I have or we hire, there are a lot of different internet, Googling that you can do. I mean, Glassdoor gives a lot of salaries, so you kind of know what the average salary is.
I second everything Catherine just said there, and one other point, if they accept your offer right off the bat, you've left money on the table, right? Your goal should be to make them squirm a little and have them come back, right? Put the ball in their court. You want at least one back and forth. If you don't, you've left money on the table. But really look at those ancillary things in your accomplishment log, because you can literally calculate the net present value of those projects, whatever else you did, to your organization's bottom line. If you brought that in, you deserve a piece of that. So make sure you tally everything up.
I have one quick thing to follow up with that. If they do accept your offer and you feel like you left something on the table, take a deep breath, go into that job and move on. It is not worth going into that job and feeling frustrated, feeling like they pulled one over on you. So use it as a learning experience, like Catherine said in her early experiences, and enjoy your job. because you got it.
Can I just say really quickly, though, it really is very, very different in academics. And so, I mean, when you're negotiating in academics, you should really know the culture of the school that you're applying to before you start making demands, because it can get you in a little bit of trouble. Sorry, I know.
And I would add to that, because I'm in academics, is find out if there's a union. If there's a union, there's no negotiation. There's a very narrow band that you can go into, and if there's no union, then all bets are off. So, but if there's a union, you better find out about that.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you all for your presentations. They are very informative. In the event that you have multiple job interviews and you want to counter one specific offer, is it appropriate to mention that you've received an offer from some other company saying, okay. Okay, thank you.
You're in high demand, that's a great thing.
I'll say the only thing in academia, if that situation arises, they're probably going to want to see that offer in writing before they'll make any effort to match it.
And one last word of caution is you don't want to rub it in their face. So you want to be very discreet about it. I would use a line, something along the lines of, I'm very excited about the offer, thank you very much. I'm entertaining offers from a couple other organizations at this time. Can I have some time to review them or evaluate them? Or you might say, if you want to put a number on it, I've got another offer on the table from another organization at X. I'm really excited about your company, your organization, you're my first choice. Would you be able to meet me at Y? But you don't rub it in their face, and be discreet about it.
I'm just wondering about negotiating on a grid system with a floor and ceiling in terms of capped salary. Does that change how you approach the negotiation for salary?
So you really don't know, right, when you're an applicant, what that is. We don't disclose that.
No, what if you do know what it is? Because it's explicitly defined in like a collective agreement.
Yeah, so again, if you can demonstrate that value and you have upfront, then you would be able to ask for more. And the one thing that I didn't get to in my presentation was somebody can always come back and say no, right? Or we're only willing to go this much. And don't be afraid of that. Don't let that fear be the reason why you don't ask.
So don't be afraid of the cap, pushing towards as close to the cap as you can.
You know what, if you can't demonstrate, so for me,
Yep.
if somebody is pushing towards that cap and they can't demonstrate or didn't demonstrate the value and they don't have it, I'm like, oh, come on, right? I won't. So, and I'm a tough negotiator. I'm a tough negotiator back. And so I do kind of think you're a little pompous, right? Or where do you get off? If you don't have that value, right? If you can't back it up. If you can back it up and you can prove that you're deserving of that, be prepared to highlight the why, right? I want to know why.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up? Is cost of living differences, and this is specifically actually for academics, but is cost of living a legitimate reason for why, as a reason?
I think that's already going to be built into the approach of the institution. So they're already going to have factored that in. I would also reiterate, it's not just about why, it's what are you bringing? And the other thing I would really stress for an academic negotiation, it's not all about salary. Yes, salary is important, but there may be 20 other things that you can negotiate for that will be as valuable to you, if not more valuable.
Thank you.
As far as postdocing goes, it tends to be a pretty oversaturated field. Is there any room for negotiation in anything, not just salary? Is there, other than just, I'll choose your postdoc or I'll go over here, other than where, is there other things you can fight for?
What do you want? Do you want time to get involved in some teaching? You want to have an upfront discussion about the project that you might be able to take from that postdoc to your faculty position? Postdocs are just as negotiable as anything else.
this is a question for Dr. Barrett, the dean. So for academic offer, after I negotiate salary or other things, if I satisfy, how long I can hold the offer? Maybe I want to think about it. Also want to compare other offer I may receive from other university, and then make a decision.
That's negotiable too. The bottom line is that if you want another month to think about it, eventually you're going to get some pushback. Eventually they're going to say, we need you to make a decision by X. But I deal with faculty hiring all the time where they come up to the deadline and they still haven't made a decision, and the departments will still let them continue to hang out there because they have invested so much in finding that right person. So they're not going to let you delay for years, but they will let you delay for reasonable periods of time.
Thank you.
And just from the private sector world, I've never, jump in here, Catherine, I've never had an offer go longer than 72 hours.
Right.
When a company makes an offer, they want you, either you know you want them or not, but they haven't got the time or the budget to keep dragging it along. But you'll know when you're getting to that point because you'll have met almost every director in the department. You'll have been there 2 or 3 times. If you're out of town, they'll have paid to fly you out at least once or twice. So once you get this offer, it's not like it's going to drop out of the blue like, oh, I didn't see that coming. So you will have had time to prepare. You would know if you had other offers on the table or not. So don't get scared by this whole 24 to 72 hour thing. By that point, you'll see it coming, and you should already have your ducks in a row and be ready to negotiate or be ready to walk away.
Hello. When you're negotiating, is there a certain standard number or percentage that you should counter offer with above the, the offer that you've been given?
I've got a number. Do you want to?
You go.
Okay. I always say anything more than 20% above what they're offering, you're starting to look pompous. Unless, again, you can really, really back that up with hard data. Usually the organization knows what the market is for your position, and they've got a pretty good idea of where you sit in that market. So when a candidate comes back to me and it's more than 20% above, and 20% is on the high side, then I really have to question their commitment to the organization and what their real motivators are. But a typical wiggle room, I would say, is more like 10 to 15%.
I would, bending down in the hills, not working for me. I would actually agree with that. And I think for the most part, with jobs that when people call me and ask me about, joining their teams, I always know the ballpark that they're willing to pay, right? And what that goes for. And then I start there. So it's something that I usually tell people, well, that's not going to get me, right? And then they're willing to come up sometimes, or we're willing to do that with candidates too. But that's a very good rule of thumb.
I'm just wondering, what sort of things can you negotiate in terms of for your partner in an academic environment if they are not an academic? What sort of things can the school offer, or can you ask them to offer in order to support helping move your partner as well? Not physically, just job-wise.
So I can speak specifically to Elon. We have an HR department that is very willing to work with you to try to match partners. And I know that if you come onto the table and say, it usually doesn't happen until you hit the negotiation part, although oftentimes people will bring it up at some point in time in their interview and say, I have a partner who does this, this, and this. Would there be any job opportunity for them? Usually during an on-campus interview, we give people the opportunity to talk. We say to them, these are the things that you have the option, these are the people you have the option to meet with, and one of them is usually an HR person, and that's usually a good place to start. If you feel comfortable enough with it, I think you can talk about it maybe a little bit if you do like a lunch or a dinner, or there's more of a, not necessarily, a little more informal time. You could probably bring it up there and kind of get feelers for it just so people know. But usually HR people are a good place to start. And I think a lot of academic institutes are willing to work with you if they want you.
Yeah, I'll speak to that too. most large universities will have an office whose job is to explore either academic or non-academic positions, whether that's in the university itself or in the surrounding community through the contacts that they may have. So that's definitely something to ask about. I would also recommend, if there are partner issues or family issues or something that you really need, don't leave it till right to the end to talk about it. I think, particularly for women sometimes, they don't bring this up. And then when they get right to the end, it's too late to figure all that out. So bring these issues up. If they're going to be deal breakers, people want to know about them. I'd also like to respond to something that Catherine said, which I think is a big cultural difference between the private sector and academia. The idea that somebody would call you up and say you're interested in a job, and the first thing you'd say is, well, what kind of ballpark compensation? And then you say, well, you're not going to get me for that. If you said that to an academic institution, it would be the kiss of death. You never talk about the salary at the beginning, and you'll see even for like leadership positions, typically there's no mention of what the expected compensation is. That's why you need to go out and figure out, is this something that it would be attractive enough for me to move?
Just to echo that, it's like so important at Elon that when we send out our initial email about the job, we actually tell our candidates that they're not supposed to talk to anybody in the department about any sort of negotiations about salary, because I have no control over this. That's a conversation that you'll have with the dean and other people, but it will not be with anybody in the department. And so when you're meeting with them, it should be focused more on the academic end of things and what you're bringing to the department.
And from the for-profit side of the coin, I don't want to sound like we're total hard noses and it's what's your number up front. It is, there's a lot of tact involved, right? I mean, it's a big turnoff to the recruiter or the hiring manager when you want to talk about salary right out of the gate. You should know enough about the market for the job that you're applying for that that's a conversation that you have 2 or 3 conversations deep, right? I don't talk about salary until at least the second or third interview. And by then, I want to know, is this person serious? Are they a really, really potential contender for this position? Is this somebody that if they're way out of the range, I can go back to my client and really go to bat for them? But it's poor form to start talking about salary right out of the gate. Get a little further, get to know, dance a little bit, right, before you start throwing that out there. The other thing is relocation. For-profit, not-for-profit, most organizations, if you're a serious candidate and you're coming from out of town, they will consider a relocation package. I've seen everything from just a few $100s to reimburse for mileage for someone who's driving down from LA to several thousands of dollars for if you're packing up a family and moving across the country. So again, relocation is something that can definitely be part of the package. Sometimes it's just that you might get a chunk of $10,000 up front, no questions asked, you spend it how you want, or sometimes you'll submit your bills and they'll reimburse you up to a certain amount, or they may actually hire a company. For instance, there's an organization called ACE Relocation. They do nothing but relocate people for companies that are hiring them and moving them around the country. But don't forget about that. And then also, again, if you have what's called a trailing spouse who's following you for your career, let's say you're not going to an academic institution, let's say you're not going directly to the organization, but you might be going through a corporate recruiter, such as myself, be sure to ask, is there anything you can do to assist my spouse? This is what they do. This is what interests them. If that recruiter is worth their salt, they're going to say, I would be more than happy to meet with your spouse and see if there are any connections we can leverage for them here in San Diego, because it's worth our effort to place your spouse every bit as much as it is to place you, because a lot of times it's a quid pro quo, even if we're doing it totally pro bono. So be sure to ask.
Okay, so Ms. Atkinson, during your presentation, you mentioned that women are less common to negotiate. So in the language of negotiation for women who may be more shy or timid, what does it sound like, or how should the conversation sound in negotiating or countering an offer for someone who may not be as dominant as maybe another woman like me?
Full disclosure, I'm a D, if you couldn't tell. So really, I mean, there's no perfect formula. So it is dependent on the job that you're going for. But it's really having that confidence in yourself and formulating what your counter is going to be. And that's why I say, take it in, you know, appreciate the offer, thank them for the offer, but then use that time to get back to them. You know, we don't have a month or, you know, many months to get back. Usually with jobs, we'll put on a 24, 48 hour. If we know you're highly recruited, we'll ask for a 24-hour response. But you can take that time. You should go through that self-assessment and that checklist and how you match up against those skill sets, right? So based on experience, the years of experience they're asking for, but also the behaviors that they wanted to see in that particular role and how you meet those qualifications. And be prepared to just discuss that. It's an easy thing. It can be intimidating, but it really is easier than it sounds if you've practiced and you put it down. With my daughter, and I used her as an example, she was not wanting to do this. We actually wrote out a script that she would be able to stick to, and I said, this is what they're going to say. You can predict usually when you've done this, and they said those exact things. So it's really practicing, and I would highly recommend, and you've heard from a few people today, find a mentor, find a coach who can help you through that process. You're welcome to contact me, you know, through the organization. But that really makes the difference, because how confident you come and how much you believe in yourself, they will pick up on that.
I would like it. I tell my students this all the time, because students don't like to come up and ask me questions during an exam, but more than likely if they do come up and ask me a question, I'm willing to help them. I want them to actually get the right answer, and I'm willing to lead them if they do come up. So if you think about it from that perspective, because I see the blue line, so you're a student still, if you think about the time before when you were afraid to go up and ask a professor a question, you sort of transition to the point where you feel confident enough to go up and ask that question, knowing that the worst they can say is, I can't answer that. The worst that they can say to you is no. So again, within reason, but if you are a quieter person and shy, don't start with someone that you're comfortable approaching, like a mentor or someone in the faculty maybe that you feel comfortable emailing and say, hey, can you help me out with some negotiations, or can I run some ideas by you, and do you think they're suitable?
And what if it doesn't go so well, right? We talked about no doesn't necessarily mean no right now. It just means no right now. Worst case scenario, salary is below what you were hoping for. You might even have to take a haircut, but you're willing to take this job because the location is awesome, or it's in your field, or it's just, you know, jobs are so scarce. You have to take a job. It's not at the salary where you want to be. At least get a commitment to review in 90 days. So that way then the employer is not overstretching their budget. And the implication there is, I'll accept this as a start. I believe in my capabilities and what I bring to the organization. If I have demonstrated that extra value, then can we talk about this and look at my package again in 90 days or 6 months or whatever period. But usually new hires, there's a 90-day probation or kind of review period. So I would shoot for 90 days or 6 months at the absolute max and say, hey, let's revisit this salary thing, and let's take a look at the value I've really brought to this organization.
Don't try that in academia.
No, your probation.
2 years.
Your probation period in academics is 6 years before you put your tenure packet in.
For government scientists, 3 years probation.
Academia is a lot longer.
Every year I got a letter
Yeah,
that said, yeah, are you going to renew this year? You're still in probation. When I first got my first letter, it was, you're on a 6-year probationary period until you go up for tenure.
But in our system, we actually have a merit review every 2 years for an assistant professor. So at the time of that, you could negotiate. If you've done something amazing, you got a grant, you got a big prize, then you could ask for your salary to be revisited.
I will say too, at a small liberal arts school too, for tenure, when teaching really is your primary goal, tenure really has sort of that old school meaning in terms of it really is about teaching integrity and the freedom to teach how you want and when you want. And so, you know, as my friend said when she got tenure, she's like, woohoo, I can't get fired. So it really, it's not dependent on you having funding or anything like that. It really sort of holds the meaning and the tradition of tenure that it was when it was first sort of established. I don't think that's the case at some research institutes.
I was just going to say one last thing. If you are intending to go into any sales role in corporate America, one of the things that I would just tell you is it is very disappointing to me or any of my sales managers who are hiring talent when they don't negotiate for a sales role. Because then right? So we lose confidence almost immediately. Like literally around the table, there's a panel and we go, oh. So make sure that if you go into a sales role, you at least ask. It doesn't mean you're always going to get it, but at least ask.
Yeah, the implication there is we hope you negotiate this hard on behalf of our customer, or on behalf of our company when you're working with clients, as you will for yourself. Because if you're not willing to negotiate for yourself, are you going to stand up for our organization?
All right, well, we ran a little over, but thank you so much to our panel. You guys were wonderful. I think this was really good. So thank you so much for coming. Make sure you fill out the evaluation form.